Right, well, welcome everybody. It's very exciting to have our research seminar this evening. I'm Jane Waite and I'm chairing the seminar today, and I'm very excited that it's our sixth seminar in our series of primary, that's K-5 computing education research. And in this series, we're focusing on computing education for our smallest of people. So our primary age learners, that's children aged from 5 to 11 years old and earlier. And that's why I'm very excited that we've got this particular session with AIM today, because it's looking at our very youngest of children. Together, we're going to explore how research can help us to support these youngsters. AIM is a graduate researcher at the fabulous DevTech research group. That's Marina Bears's group, and I've been rather obsessed with their work for many years. AIM specialises in data science for early childhood education and particularly learning analytics. And she's got a focus on looking at children's engagement patterns with the gorgeous ScratchJr. And she explores the connections between these patterns and their learning experiences. And AIM's expertise expands constructionism, socio-emotional learning, adaptive and instructional systems, and machine learning. So I'm personally, and we are all really excited to hear about some of her recent research as part of the Coding as Another Language project. And in today's seminar, AIM will share some of the insights around the ScratchJr rubric that was developed, and about the process of how young children are creating stuff. And I think that's going to be really important for us as teachers as we're using these tablet-based coding applications. So without further ado, AIM, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Apittha. I just go by AIM, and I graduated from Tufts University. So then I was in the DevTech research group that Jane mentioned earlier. And then we study early childhood computer science. So from 4 to 7, like 4 to 6 years old. And then the two studies that I'm going to talk about today, the first one it's on ScratchJr Project Rubric, which is a study that I conducted earlier in my PhD. And then the second study, it's actually my dissertation project, which I defended at the end of last year. So this is my first talk in a while. So I'm very excited to be here. Let's get started. Okay, so as I just mentioned, that the first study is on ScratchJr Project Rubric. And then, so the objective is for educators and researchers to be able to assess children's final product of when using ScratchJr, which is the project. And then study 2, it's like I got an inspiration from my first project. So then rather than just looking at the end outcome, we realized that understanding the learning process it's very important as the final outcome. So that's why study 2 happens. And then later on, we're going to have breakout rooms. So these two projects are under the CAL project, which stands for Coding as Another Language. So we got fundings from the US Department of Education to develop a coding curriculum for K-2, and then we also implemented in different public schools in the US. So then we implemented it in like 4 different states in the US, over 30, 40 schools. And then this CAL curriculum, it's literacy based, so then it's integrated with literacy. So then the activities would include like reading stories to kids. So then in this picture, this teacher is reading Where the Wild Things Are, and then they get to plan it out in their design journal. They get to like draw, they get to like write out. And then also they're also learning the design process, which is like as imagine, plan, create, and improve. And this is what they follow. So then the curriculum really follows like coding as literacy. And then we're comparing like coding and language. And this is the homepage for coding as a secondary language. If you're interested, it's free, and then it's like very well done. And then we invested a lot in this project. So then you can follow the link. Maybe you can drop the link later on. So then not only ScratchJr, it also has the Kibo project, which is like a tangible robot, like wooden tangible robot Kibo. There's also a curriculum there for, I think for Kibo it starts from pre-K, so pre-K to grade 2, and then for ScratchJr it's like kindergarten to grade 2. And then what is inside is that if you click in the website, it actually gives you like lesson 1 to lesson 24. It has like all the objectives, and then how it is like aligned with like ideas of literacy, and then it has like different materials, and then like different sections in the curriculum for you to check out. And we also have, so then DevTech Research Group, we also have a web page for the research instruments. So then the first study that I'm going to talk about is the ScratchJr Project Rubric. It's under ScratchJr Instruments. So then these like instruments are all like validated, where you can click inside and then you can get trained, and then you can actually download the assessment where you can use in your classroom. So here comes the first study, which was done not so long ago. So as you all know, that CS education starts like very early on. It has become like very popular across the world because computational skills became very essential for like the 21st century, because it not only teaches kids how to code, but then it teaches like multiple skills for life. So like problem solving, or like thinking systematically, and yeah, many other like positive benefits. And then one effective learning pedagogy for early childhood, or like aligning with constructionism, it's for them to create like open-ended creative coding projects. So then millions of ScratchJr projects have been created like until date, and then like I think like 10 millions of projects have been created like monthly. So this is what inspired us to create a rubric to try to understand how kids are doing with this ScratchJr project. So before I go into the project, before I go into the rubric, I want to go over that there are 28 ScratchJr blocks, and then we split them into 3 levels, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So then beginner blocks, they mostly consist of like motion blocks and then like look blocks, whereas intermediate and advanced, they contains like the other yellow trigger blocks, and then also the control, we call it control blocks. So then there's a controlling speed, like loop, and things like that. And this is an example of a project, and where I will point out different like concepts that you can actually see from this, just like watching this project. So then before I even start, there are 2 sequences right here. It's parallelism. So then it tells the character to do multiple things at the same time. So just like rolling down the bed. And then you can see here that a picture was taken, and then this one was like, it was like customized. There is like a messaging block, which is a hard concept for little kids. And then there's also like text entry. So there's a lot of things going on in this project, but then it kind of shows that if you really understand like what concepts kids can learn from ScratchJr, then I think it's like very meaningful. The ScratchJr Project Rubric is trying to assess meaningful creation of kids. And it's very important that what we grade must be purposeful. So then we're not going to grade like random blocks like flying around, or like random characters with no codes, or like things like that. So then it has to be like very intentional in what they create. And then we split the components into 2. So then there is the coding concepts with 6 concepts, and then project design with there are 7 like subcategories of them. the scores out of 4. And then for the coding concepts, as there are 6 of them, I'm going to show you what it looks like to get the highest score for each subcategory. So the first one is sequencing. It means like whether they're able to create coding blocks, like just to create like a working coding blocks with 7 or more blocks, excluding the end block, because without the end block, the code will still work. And then for repeat, the highest score would be like nested loop, or like a loop with like a forever loop. And then for events, it's like you're sending one message to like the other message. It's like you're using multiple messages like color. And then parallelism is when you have like more than one, when you have multiple like lines of codes. And then the highest score is when you try to send like a message to like 2 other commands like this. And then coordination is when 2 characters are trying to coordinate with each other using like a speed block or like wait block or like stop block. And then number parameter is whether they're able to use a number like efficiently without like having motions block like repeating like over and over. You can just do that with like parameters. So then that is it. We collected projects from 2 different schools, and then according to like the Cal curriculum, there are 3 time points that we collected the projects. So then it kind of shows like early in the curriculum, mid curriculum, and then at the end the final project of the curriculum. And then we try to compare if the score actually like change across time, what it looks like. So it shows that it turns out that out of the total score of 40, it turns out that if you look at the density curve right here, that the score increases as time passes. So it's showing that kids are actually improving with their ScratchJr project. The quality is becoming better. And then at time point 3, it seems like there's a wider variety in what they created. And then if you look at the most common and then the subcategories with the highest scores. So when you look at the plot right here, so the blue bars are the mean score of the subcategories out of 4. And then the red line right here is the percentage of the project that contain this certain subcategory. So then this one shows that coordination and repeat like appear like the least frequent in all the projects. And then whereas like the most common and with the highest mean score would be like sequencing and then number parameter. So it means that like these two concepts, like sequencing and number parameter, they're really easier than the other concepts compared to like parallelism, repeat, and coordination. So then I think the key takeaway is that like these are the concepts that should be like that we should support the students more, like give them more scaffolding, especially I think parallelism, it's like very hard for them to understand. And as well as like nested repeat loops as well. And for project design, I think like kids, they don't really find it hard to like design their projects and then use the painting tools because they can spend forever using painting tools. And the most common categories would be number of characters and the number of settings. They tend to use like multiple characters as well as like multiple settings. But then the least common would be like speech bubble when they type the speech bubble or using the sound or like the look blocks. But then still, if you compare it between project design and the coding aspect, project designs would normally like be higher. They would get higher scores in the project design. And then I didn't put it on the slide, but then it turns out that project design and the coding aspect, they're actually correlated. So it means that the kids that actually devoted a lot in their project design, customizing a lot, they also got like higher scores in their coding project. They're like correlated, so then it can mean like multiple things. We didn't look much into it, but that might mean the meaning might be that like the more they're like invested in their project, in like the design aspect, they're also like want to like code more. But that is what we need to check. And moving on to the second study. So this is my dissertation. So we move on to looking into the learning process, which I think is very interesting, because learning is a process rather than just the end outcome. And by looking at these two pictures right here, so then this is actually very common, and I heard a lot from like multiple teachers that like kids, like they tend to like the final product might not be actually what they actually know. So then, for example, in this one, in like mid session of a lesson, they actually included a message block, which is like a complex block, but then by the end they removed it, and then it's just like left with like all like the easy blocks. So then by just looking at the end outcome, we're not going to understand that the kid might be like struggling with the blocks, or like did they like master like a more difficult blocks, or is it just that they only like are able to use like simple blocks? So that's why there is a limited understanding in their processes when they create coding projects, especially in younger kids. But then in like older kids, like high school or like university, like at the college level, I think it's more common for like studies to look into the process. And then this is important because it is it's like to improve like instructional and curriculum design, especially in early childhood, which is like relatively new compared to like adults or like older kids. And so basically the objective of this study was to look at how did young children create their ScratchJr projects. And then there are two main phases. So in the pilot phase, it's a qualitative study. So I observe the screen recording of their activity with ScratchJr when they create their project. So then I watched like the entire session on how they create their project. And then I came up with like the actions that stood out, and then like the process that stood out. And then after naming these processes, I then move on to the main phase, which is I quantify these processes by using Google Analytics, which Google Analytics collect usage data of kids like ScratchJr, like ScratchJr activity. So we actually use a special version of ScratchJr, not like the common ScratchJr. So like this ScratchJr version collects data like deeper than like the normal ScratchJr. So it's able to tell like by classroom level whether this kid's like not identifiable, like kid A, whether this kid A at this time point, whether this kid A used like this block or that block or that block. So then it's like a timestamp of actions. And then by looking at this like action logs, I'm able to like quantify their process. And then I use these processes to understand their learning experience as ScratchJr. And then so like specifically, I look at their block usage, so the block variety, like whether like the number of unique blocks they use, and then block complexity. So then block complexity means like whether they use like intermediate and advanced like block levels. So this is similar to what I explained earlier, that in the Cal curriculum, there are three main points when they created their ScratchJr. So I actually like compared the 3 time points, whether the process would be different, which it turns out to be different. So in the pilot study, so this is what I found. So then there are 4 key actions. So in the coding categories, the first one is to create like a new code from scratch. So then they just start a new sequence from blank. And then the second action is to revise the code. So then they might rework on the same code after they tested their code, after they execute their code, and then they revise. And then the third one is to explore. So they would be like trying out intermediate and advanced like ScratchJr blocks like repeatedly. You can tell that they're trying out things. They're like tinkering, they're trying out things. And then lastly, it's to customize their project or using the painting tools. So yeah, so it's just like customizing their project. So then from these 4 actions, I took these 4 actions to come up with, I named the process from these 4 actions. So the first process is called project iteration. It is a mixture between all the actions. So like it's a mixture between creating new sequence, customizing, and then revising. So for an example, in this case, so like this child created a new sequence for a scuba diver, and then this child added a whale, added a character is customized, and then this child also created a new sequence for this whale, and then realized that it became so small because it just like shrunk like repeatedly. So then the sequence got revised by adding like a growing block. So then this is like iterating the project like over in like multiple cycles. So that's why it's called project iteration. And then the next one, it's very straightforward. So then this process is called long customization, which means that they're customizing for a very long time. So for example, I set it to be 10% of the session duration, but it tends to be longer than that. Like normally they can paint for a very long time as well. And then the last one is coding exploration. It means that they're trying out the intermediate or advanced block like repeatedly. So for example, in this case, like this sequence not right? Like the message should be in a different sequence. And then so this child actually like tries to like change the colors around. It didn't work out. And finally this child got it right. So then the child finally sent a message to like a different character, which is right. So that is coding exploration. And so I got 3 processes, and then I brought them to the main study. So this is what Google Analytics log data looks like. So it came in like a timestamp. So then I was able to tell which school the child is in, and then which level, and then which class, which are all like keywords on the, which are like how do you call it? They're just like names. So then like it's not identifiable. So then all of the kids, they're all like, it's like a pseudo code. I can't tell like who the kids are. And then I compared the two. I tried to like quantify processes from this log data from what I found in the qualitative study. And I use regression. And to go over the outcomes that I measure again, so then it's block variety, so the unique number of blocks that they use in their final in their final time 3 or like their final project, and then the complexity of the block, which once again is the intermediate and advanced block. And this comes the results and discussion. So I found that on average, kids use around 8 different block types across time points. So then it doesn't change much. It was like 7, like 9, and 8. So then they're quite stable at 8 block types. And then so like many of you might be wondering whether 8 block type is enough. And this is what it looks like to use 8 block types, which for me, for my opinion, I think it's enough for them to create like a meaningful like project for themselves.
Nice.
It's worth it. It's purposeful.
It says this?
Yeah.
This is the one they're hanging from the trees. And then this is
What happened?
he's going.
He just keeps flipping over.
Yeah. So that is what 8 block types look like. So what I found is that exploration promotes block variety. So then the more they they explore earlier in the lessons. In the final lesson, there's like higher block variety later on. And then what I'm looking forward in the next research is that instead of looking at the unique block types, like for example, this one, like 6 unique block types, I think research should also look into different block categories. So if you compare the code on top and then code at the bottom, so they're both 6 unique blocks, but they're different because the top one only has like mostly contains like motion blocks, but then the second one, it has like multiple like types of block, which is important when you teach in a classroom. It's important for them to try out like different colors of blocks. And then because they contain different coding concepts. And then the next question is that I found that guided exploration, or when after teachers taught like the block functions to the kids, like they're more likely to explore the blocks after they were taught the functions of the block. And then it turns out that the kids that explored more, they tend to use like more complex like block in their final project as well. So then the kids that explore earlier in the lessons, they tend to explore more in their final projects, and then especially after the teachers taught them how to use a block. And then so then there is like more exploration after they learn the block functions. So then I think to compare, it's like when a child like gets like a compass when they're exploring the world. So like once you have like a guidance, there's like more purpose, and then they know how to like explore like intentionally. And this is like a summary of what teaching strategies might look like across curriculum. So then in like early on in the lessons, like I think kids should focus on the coding aspect of ScratchJr, and then don't introduce the painting tools just yet. So then they can like free play, they can like self-discover different functions, especially like the basic blocks, like just make sure that they know how the characters can move with like the motion blocks. And then once they're like sure with the motion blocks, then in the mid curriculum, after they are introduced to the painting tools, make it clear to them how long they get the time for like customizing versus coding, or like are you gonna set a time for customizing at the beginning or like later on. Just to be very clear with them like the expectation, because they can like customize like forever, and then because they're very creative, and then painting is like very fun for them, which is also good for them, but then I think should be clear on like with the time organization. And then also more guidance on the advanced block before it, so then they can explore. And then at the end, make sure that if you want to promote iteration, which is like an important concept for young kids as well, that make sure to provide multiple sessions for them to work on the same project like over and over. They might think that they're done, but then you can still like give recommendations on like how to improve their codes, like how they can like add more details, like adding more characters or like adding more background. And so like there are like multiple things that they can keep like iterating, which is like a very important skills for them. And in conclusion, there should be a mixture of free exploration and direct guidance in young kids, because it is very important to show them what is available before they can like start exploring on their own. And this is especially true with CS, like with computer science concept, which has like require multiple consequential steps, which might be like difficult for them, like overloading for them. And then especially when they're still working on their reading skills, it is unlikely they're gonna like hover over the block, try to read what the block names are, and like just like, oh, okay, this is like message. And then it's very hard for them to like just like guess on their own. So it's important to like give them guidance. And this is it. And I would like to thank my dissertation committee, Dr. Marina Bears, Dr. Sarah Johnson, Dr. Remco Shung, and then Dr. Karen Brennan for their guidance. And I'll always remember them.
Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and for getting involved in the activity. Can we do one of those big round of virtual applauses? That's always nice to do. We're back on the 12th of September, and it's Louisa who's coming from the University of Passau. Very, very excited about this. She's going to be sharing feedback strategies. I don't think we do enough in terms of feedback. I've become a bit obsessed with feedback literacy. So, and it's for primary school students to encourage learning and promote positive attitudes towards computing rather than being bored. So that's great. So have a lovely summer to everybody, and we'll see you in September. And huge thank you again to AIM for sharing her research, and to everybody for participating.